And now I'm talking to Tom Casey from Medicines, Frontières, MSF Ireland. Tom, welcome to the programme.
Hi Darren, good to speak with you.
All right, Tom, I'm talking to you today on radio to get an update from you, primarily about the work of MSF in the Mediterranean. But you're very busy in MSF though in general, aren't you, these days? Because I got a newsletter from you recently that said that for your annual report for 2017, there's been a huge upscale of your work since the year before that. Before we focus on the Mediterranean, could you just give us, our listeners, a summary of how your work in general has grown in the last couple or few years?
Sure. So as an independent humanitarian medical organisation, MSF provides healthcare to people affected by poverty, conflict, natural disaster and war. Last year we actually provided over 10 million health consultations in 72 countries. In recent years there have been huge health needs around the world. This could be for things like ongoing conflict in places like Syria, Yemen or Afghanistan. But MSF also responds to natural disasters and disease outbreaks, such as the current outbreak of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where MSF teams are on the ground fighting the epidemic as we speak. Because of our independence and neutrality, we're able to reach people in places that other organisations are unable to get to and respond to crises very quickly as they unfold.
How many staff members do you have working for us internationally, do you know?
I think it's around 42,000 staff members. In last year, 462 projects in 72 countries. So we really are a global organisation.
And how do you get all these staff members? Like, is it primarily through volunteering, or do you have like full-time workers as well, or what's the story like?
So it's a mix. So there are various kind of offices around the world, such as in Ireland, which is where I work, where we'll have full-time staff, just like any other office. People working in HR and communications and fundraising and things like that. Then also, the majority of our health staff are people from the countries in which we work. You know, they definitely do the majority of our work, and MSF wouldn't exist without them.
We'll come back maybe at the end of the interview talk about MSF in general, but to talk while we're primarily talking today, because I know there's news I know you're on the national news this week in Ireland and internationally about your work in the Central Mediterranean. I've heard, just to talk in general about the Central Mediterranean, I've heard that the Irish Navy have had a ship there helping migrants and refugees in the last couple of years. What are MSF doing there?
Yeah, so the Irish Navy has been in the Mediterranean for a number of years, and they've unquestionably saved the lives of many people in the Mediterranean, and MSF certainly respects them for doing so. Unfortunately, over the last few years, the role of the Irish and other European navies has slightly shifted. So whereas previously they were focused entirely on saving lives, since last year the focus is now, as part of Operation Sophia, which is what it's called, the focus is now more on disrupting traffickers and also training the Libyan Coast Guard to intercept people and then return them to Libya. And when people are returned to Libya, they're put through arbitrary detention and have the risk of suffering extreme violence, torture, extortion, and physical and sexual abuse. So since 2015, when MSF saw thousands of people drowning in the Mediterranean, as a humanitarian organisation, we felt we had to respond. So since then, we've assisted over 76,000 people at sea. And as you saw just this last week, our search and rescue ship Aquarius, which we run with another NGO called SOS Mediterranean, we rescued 141 people, including 67 unaccompanied minors.
A friend of mine, I didn't see it now, but a friend of mine told me he watched a documentary on Netflix recently talking about the humanitarian situation in Libya and North Africa, where the refugees and migrants are coming from. And there's a group of gangsters or something called Black Hand. Do you know anything about them, or what the situation or more about the situation?
I don't know that specific group, but what I do know is that Libya, it's a largely lawless country with various different militias kind of fighting for control. And I think what's kind of common to a lot of these militias is that migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers are seen as a commodity. They're a way for them to make money. So that's why people are captured, sold into labour, or even, in some cases, tortured, and then asked to contact their family members to kind of pay a ransom for their release. And these are stories we've heard time and time again from people we've rescued on our search and rescue ship.
So are you saying that most of the people who are trying to get into Europe on these ships are refugees? Like, they're not actually migrants. They're refugees escaping, like, a kind of lawless life, to put it in that term. Like, would you say that?
So, I guess it's difficult to say because, I mean, there's an awful lot of conflict around the world. People we rescue have come from, Syria or Bangladesh or any number of countries. But what we do know is the vast majority of them have transited through Libya. And whilst in Libya, that's where they're subjected to this horrific treatment and torture and just really, really terrible things. So whilst I can't sort of speak for the reasons everyone left their home country, what happens in the vast majority of cases is that people have sort of finally made it out of arbitrary detention in Libya, where they've been subjected to just indescribable treatment.
And is there a government in Libya now, or what's the story? Do you know?
I'm not entirely sure, but what I do know is there's no kind of. I think there's ongoing conflict between multiple armed groups.
What are you calling upon the EU and other governments involved in the situation to do?
Well, what we've long said is that the European asylum system is broken and needs to be fixed so that they treat people with dignity and compassion, particularly people who've been through violence in their home countries or indeed violence in Libya. As MSF, we're a humanitarian medical organisation, so our focus is on saving lives and providing health care, and we don't claim to have all the answers. But what we've seen over the last few years in European migration policies is an attempt to try and keep migration out of sight and out of mind of the European public, with really dreadful implications for the migrants concerned. So we're calling for long-term sustainable solutions and call for Europe to stop policies that try to return people to Libya, improve safe and legal channels for refugee and asylum seekers to reach Europe, but also for Europe to prioritise the saving of lives at sea by providing their own dedicated search and rescue service, or to stop obstructing NGOs such as MSF. Just yesterday, the UNHCR said that crossing the Mediterranean is now 3 times more deadly than it was last year. So 1 in 17 people who attempt the crossing will drown. Europe should really act with humanity and try to put a stop to this humanitarian crisis.
Are you saying that if ships do leave Libya and they actually reach Italy or Greece or wherever they're going, they're actually sent back, are they?
No. So currently, the kind of laws of the maritime, international maritime laws state that if a boat's in distress and you rescue people at sea, you should take it to the nearest port of safety. Now, as I've described, in Libya, people were subjected to horrific treatment. In fact, actually, just this week, our Irish nurse on board the Aquarius, Aoife, told us about a 23-year-old man from Eritrea who'd been caught in Libya and had been made to phone his family. And whilst he's on the phone to his family, his captors were burning his hands as a mean to extort him. So this is what happens to people in Libya, and this is why it's not a port of safety. And it's not just MSF who says this, the UN has acknowledged it. So once you rescue somebody at sea, you have to return them to a port of safety, and that is not what Libya is. Now Europe through Operation Sophia, has been training and equipping the Libyan Coast Guard to carry out rescues. Whenever somebody's rescued by the Libyan Coast Guard, they're returned to Libya. So MSF is against Europe's policies of almost outsourcing their search and rescue to the Libyan Coast Guard. We're calling for Europe to conduct its own search and rescue operations that return people to a place of safety and allow them to carry on their lives with the dignity they deserve.
Along with the huge amount of pain and suffering coming from Libya and being sent back to Libya causes, it sounds unsustainable what the EU are doing to me. Do you agree?
Well, I mean, we certainly hope so. I mean, we just, as humanitarians, we think that Europe should be acting with compassion and dignity towards these people. I mean, and what's interesting is since the kind of peak of 2015, the numbers of people reaching Europe have reduced drastically. Now, MSF would feel that Europe should be able to respond, and for kind of countries in Europe to act with more solidarity towards the people they rescue, but also towards nations such as Italy and Greece, who have generally received the vast numbers of rescued people. What happened this week after we rescued people was Italy and Malta refused to allow us to disembark at their ports. And, you know, these people had been at sea in precarious little boats for up to 36 hours before being rescued. And then we had to wait a few days whilst Europe tried to respond. What was encouraging was that eventually we were allowed to disembark in Malta after 5 European states offered to take rescued people in. That showed a greater level of solidarity. And MSF hopes that that's a sign of Europe showing more solidarity, more leadership and more compassion to respond to migration.
Just another couple of questions, Tom. I won't keep you all day, and I'm very busy. Do we have any idea of how big the problem is? Like, how many people are in Libya, do you know, trying to get to Europe? Do you have any idea?
I mean, it's very difficult to know, to be perfectly honest, because of the lawless nature of Libya. Few organisations are able to offer there, able to operate there. So the UNHCR and the IOM, they both have a very limited capacity there. I mean, we are able to operate there ourselves. I think the latest estimates was there could be tens of thousands of people detained, but it's very difficult to say with any certainty.
I think if the UN should deploy troops or something if it's that bad, you know what I mean? Or if the EU ever gets around to having an EU army, they should look after help their neighbours and help police North Libya so people are not being at the will of gangsters and all these kind of people. You know what I mean? You were saying there.
Well, as a humanitarian organisation, our focus is just providing people with medical care. So we certainly wouldn't kind of give any opinion on that sort of matter. We just want to treat people for the medical conditions we see, and then we speak out accordingly when we witness something.
You were saying you have an Irish nurse on board your ship. Do you have one ship, or do you have more than one ship at the moment?
So we have one ship at the moment. It's called Aquarius.
Oh yeah.
Run in partnership with SOS Mediterranean. Yes, Aoife is our Irish nurse. She's also the vulnerable person's focal point on board. So she's responsible for identifying rescued people who are defined as particularly vulnerable. So that's people like unaccompanied minors, victims of torture, or survivors of sexual violence. During this latest rotation on the ship, Aoife has actually been recording some video diaries of her time on board, which you can watch at msf.ie.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say, Tom, before we finish up?
No, thank you for the opportunity to speak to our listeners, Darren. MSF really does rely on people talking about us, getting our messages out there. One of the founding principles of MSF is we would speak out about the things we see. So we really appreciate any chance to speak out on behalf of our patients. So thanks very much.